I never thought my life would take the turn it did. And even now, when I think back, I can hardly believe how something so unexpected changed me in ways I never imagined. It all started one quiet evening, when I found myself in the living room, flipping through my phone, half lost in the noise of the world outside and half trapped in my own thoughts. My mom had always been a strong, confident woman, someone who carried herself with elegance no matter the situation, and I often admired her ability to step into a room and command attention without saying much. She wasn't glamorous in the celebrity sense, but she had this timeless grace about her, like she knew exactly who she was and had no fear of showing it. That night she came into the room carrying a laundry basket, humming a tune I vaguely recognized from the radio. She placed the basket on the couch and began sorting clothes, folding shirts and pairing socks. I didn't think much of it until she pulled out something that made me look up from my phone. It was a piece of delicate black lace, a lingerie set that looked far too fancy to be tucked away in the back of a drawer. I felt my face heat up instantly, a mix of embarrassment and curiosity rushing over me. I didn't know why my eyes lingered on it, but they did. The lace shimmered under the soft lamplight, delicate yet bold, and I couldn't help but wonder what it felt like, what it would be like to put it on. She noticed my glance, and instead of scolding me for staring, she smiled knowingly, like she could see right through me. "You know," she said softly, folding it with unusual care, "clothes are just fabric until someone gives them meaning. People think lingerie is only about seduction, but sometimes it's about feeling powerful in your own skin." Her words stuck in my mind long after she left the room. I lay in bed that night replaying the image of that black lace, and for reasons I couldn't explain, I felt a pull toward it, a strange sense of belonging I had never experienced before. Days passed, but the thought never left me. I began noticing things I hadn't before, the way fabrics moved, the way certain outfits seemed to transform the person wearing them. I caught myself staring a little longer at mannequins in shop windows, not because I was attracted to them, but because I wondered how it would feel to step into their place, to wear something so openly different from what was expected of me. My heart would race at the thought, and yet I buried it deep down, too afraid to even admit it to myself. One afternoon, when the house was unusually quiet, I wandered into my mom's room. The door creaked as I pushed it open, and I froze for a moment, listening to make sure no one was around. My eyes fell on her dresser, and there in the second drawer I found it, the black lace set carefully folded, waiting. My hands shook as I reached for it, the fabric light as air in my fingers. I could feel my heartbeat in my ears as I carried it to the mirror. Holding it against my body, I saw a reflection that didn't feel entirely foreign, even though it should have. Something in me whispered that I belonged in it, that this wasn't just curiosity. It was a calling. I hesitated, but curiosity won. I slipped it on, piece by piece, fumbling with the delicate straps, struggling against the fear that someone might walk in. When I finally looked at myself in the mirror, my breath caught. The reflection staring back at me wasn't the boy I saw every day. It was softer, more vulnerable, yet strangely more complete. My frame wasn't perfect for it, but the feeling, the sensation of the fabric against my skin, made me stand taller, made me feel like I was stepping into someone I was always meant to be. That moment should have terrified me, but instead, it filled me with a warmth I couldn't shake. For the first time in my life, I felt a sense of alignment between what I saw in the mirror and what I had always felt deep inside. The lace wasn't just fabric anymore. It was a key unlocking a door I never knew I was allowed to open. The sound of the front door unlocking snapped me back to reality. My stomach dropped, and I scrambled to take it off, shoving it back into the drawer, my hands clumsy and frantic. I barely managed to throw on my own clothes before my mom stepped into the room. She looked at me, her eyes sharp and knowing, and for a terrifying second, I thought she had caught me. But she just smiled faintly and said, "You've been in here a while. Everything okay?" My voice cracked as I mumbled some excuse and rushed past her, my cheeks burning. That night I couldn't sleep. I tossed and turned, haunted by the memory of the reflection I had seen. It wasn't just curiosity anymore, it was need. But along with the longing came guilt, fear of being discovered, of being judged, of losing the little bit of stability I had. Yet the more I tried to push it away, the stronger it grew. The next weekend everything changed. My mom called me into her room. I walked in nervously, wondering if she was going to confront me. She was sitting on the edge of the bed, a thoughtful look on her face, and beside her was that same black lace set. She patted the spot next to her, and with a shaky breath I sat down. She picked up the lingerie and held it out to me. "I know," she said simply. My heart stopped. "I know what you've been feeling. You don't have to hide it from me." I couldn't move, couldn't speak. My throat was dry, my hands trembling. She placed the fabric in my lap gently, like it was both a gift and a secret. "I wore these for years thinking they were about someone else," she continued, her voice steady. "But I realized they were about me. About confidence, about identity. If this is something that makes you feel more like yourself, then it belongs to you too." Tears stung my eyes as I tried to find the words, but none came. She pulled me into a hug, her embrace warm and steady, and whispered, "You're not alone in this." From that moment on, things were never the same. Slowly, she began sharing pieces with me. Not just lingerie, but dresses, makeup tips, advice on how to walk with grace. Each step felt like stepping deeper into myself, peeling away layers of fear I had carried for so long. The more I experimented, the more I discovered a version of me that had always been waiting, silent but persistent. It wasn't easy. There were moments of doubt, nights where I cried, terrified of what the world would think. There were times I stared in the mirror and wondered if I was just pretending. But then there were moments, powerful, undeniable moments, where I looked at myself fully dressed, makeup done, hair styled, and felt a rush of recognition. This was me. This had always been me. The first time I stepped outside dressed that way, my knees nearly buckled. My mom walked beside me, her presence a steady anchor, whispering encouragement. People glanced, some curious, some indifferent, but the world didn't end like I feared. In fact, for the first time I felt the sun on my skin and the breeze through my hair in a way that felt real, like I was finally living instead of hiding. Every step of the journey was tangled with fear and joy, with confusion and clarity. My mom's support became my lifeline. She reminded me that identity isn't about fitting into boxes others create. It's about finding the truth inside yourself, even if it takes courage to embrace it. Looking back, it's almost poetic that it all began with a piece of lace, something so fragile yet powerful enough to unlock an entire world inside me. My transformation wasn't just about clothes or appearances. It was about facing myself, about daring to embrace what I had buried for so long. Now, when I look in the mirror, I see someone whole. Someone who isn't hiding behind fear or shame. Someone who found strength in softness and courage in vulnerability. And every time I slip into something delicate, something my mom once shared with me, I remember that night, that gift, and the moment everything began to change. Because it wasn't just about lingerie. It was about love, acceptance, and finally becoming who I was always meant to be. After that night when my mom gave me the black lace and told me I wasn't alone, I thought things would get easier right away. In some ways they did. I no longer had to sneak around, no longer had to feel that sharp stab of guilt when I touched something that didn't belong to me. But with that freedom came a new kind of weight, a realization that this wasn't just a secret hobby or a passing curiosity. It was real, and it was growing, and now that I had tasted acceptance, there was no way I could go back to burying it deep inside. The next morning I woke up with a strange mixture of excitement and dread. Excitement because my mom had made it clear that she was willing to help me. Dread because I didn't know how far I was ready to go, or even how much of myself I was ready to reveal. I stood in front of the bathroom mirror brushing my teeth, staring at the face that stared back. Same haircut, same tired eyes, same boy I'd seen my entire life. And yet, behind the reflection, I could almost see her, the version of me who had looked back in that lingerie, softer and more alive. She wasn't fully formed yet, but I could feel her presence like a shadow waiting to step into the light. Later that day, my mom knocked on my door holding a small shopping bag. She didn't say anything at first, just set it on my bed and sat down beside me. My stomach twisted as I peeked inside. A light pink camisole, simple but elegant, folded neatly, and a pair of satin shorts that shimmered faintly. I picked them up with shaking hands, unable to hide the way my breath quickened. "They're yours," she said softly. "Something comfortable to start with. Nothing too overwhelming." I couldn't hold back the tears. It wasn't just about the clothes, it was about what they represented. Trust, understanding, the freedom to step closer to myself without shame. That night, when I slipped into the camisole and shorts, I felt an almost indescribable comfort. They weren't flashy like the black lace, but they wrapped around me like a second skin, soft and safe. I curled up in bed, running my fingers along the fabric, and for the first time in years, I fell asleep without that gnawing anxiety in my chest. Days turned into weeks, and my mom gently guided me through each step, never pushing too far but always encouraging me to explore. One Saturday morning she sat me down at her vanity and said, "Today, let's try something new." She pulled out a small makeup kit, the kind I had only ever seen her use when getting ready for an event. My heart raced as she dabbed foundation onto a sponge and explained each step. At first it felt strange, the cool liquid brushing across my skin, the slight weight of powder settling on my face. But when she turned the mirror toward me, I froze. It wasn't a drastic change, but it was enough. My skin looked smoother, my features softer. It was me, but not the me I had always been forced to see. "Do you see it?" she asked gently. I nodded, too choked up to speak. With each new step, lip gloss, a faint blush, a careful line of eyeliner, I felt pieces of myself unlocking. My mom laughed softly when I flinched at the mascara wand, steadying my chin as she showed me how to stay still. And when she was done, I couldn't stop staring at my reflection. I looked beautiful. Not perfect, not polished, but beautiful in a way that felt true. That day, I stayed in my room for hours, practicing, wiping it off, starting again. Every mistake was frustrating, but every small success lit me up inside. My hands shook, my lines were crooked, but with each try I saw her more clearly. The girl inside me wasn't just a dream anymore. She was stepping forward, her presence undeniable. But with joy came fear. Every time I felt that rush of recognition, the weight of the outside world crashed down harder. What if someone else found out? What would my friends think? My relatives? The neighbors? The thought of whispers, judgment, rejection, it terrified me. Some nights I sat on my bed staring at the pink camisole in my hands, wondering if I was walking into a storm I wasn't strong enough to survive. One evening, as if sensing my turmoil, my mom sat beside me and said, "Do you know what scared me most when I was your age? Not being accepted. But you know what saved me? Learning that acceptance starts here." She tapped her chest, right over her heart. "The rest will follow in time." Her words stayed with me, but they didn't erase the fear. Instead, they gave me a kind of quiet bravery, a reminder that even if the world felt heavy, I had at least one person on my side. And sometimes, one person is enough to keep going. The first big test came sooner than I expected. We were invited to a small family gathering at my aunt's house. Normally I would have just thrown on jeans and a hoodie, but that morning my mom surprised me with a soft lavender blouse. She handed it to me without a word, her eyes shining with quiet encouragement. My hands trembled as I held it, my mind spinning with excuses. But something in her steady gaze gave me strength. I put it on, buttoning it slowly, my breath shallow. It wasn't overtly feminine, just gentle, flowing, but to me it felt monumental. Walking into my aunt's house felt like walking into fire. Every glance felt like scrutiny, every laugh like mockery, even though no one actually said anything. My heart pounded so hard I thought it might break through my chest. But then, something unexpected happened. My cousin smiled at me warmly, complimenting the color, saying it suited me. That tiny gesture, so simple and casual, nearly broke me open with relief. For the first time, I realized maybe the world wasn't as unforgiving as I had imagined. Maybe, just maybe, there was space for me to exist as I truly was. When we got home that night, I collapsed onto my bed, my blouse wrinkled from hours of tension. My mom sat beside me, brushing a strand of hair from my face, and whispered, "You were brave today. I'm proud of you." Those words echoed in my chest like a lifeline, stronger than any fear. As weeks rolled on, my transformation deepened, not just in appearance but in spirit. I started keeping a small notebook, writing down my thoughts, sketching outfit ideas, tracking my feelings. Some entries were filled with joy, others with despair, but together they painted a picture of someone growing, someone learning to accept every part of themselves. There were nights when I stood in front of the mirror dressed fully, makeup done, hair brushed, and whispered my own name out loud. Not the one everyone else used, but the one I had chosen for myself in the quiet corners of my heart. Each time I said it, it felt a little more real, a little more mine. It wasn't easy, and it wasn't perfect. Some days I felt strong, other days I crumbled under the weight of doubt. But through it all, my mom's support never wavered. She shared more of her wardrobe with me, guiding me patiently, reminding me that transformation wasn't about rushing, it was about unfolding one step at a time. And slowly, step by step, I began to believe that maybe, just maybe, I could truly become the person I was always meant to be. The comfort of home had become my sanctuary, a place where I could try on new parts of myself without fear, but deep down I knew I couldn't stay hidden forever. The outside world loomed like a storm, unpredictable and unforgiving. My mom kept reminding me that growth meant stepping beyond the walls we build for ourselves. But each time I imagined walking into school or down the street dressed as the person I was becoming, my chest tightened with panic. It was a rainy afternoon when the first real challenge arrived. I was in my room, carefully brushing mascara onto my lashes, still shaky but better than before, when my phone buzzed. A message from my best friend Daniel. "Hey, we're all meeting at the cafe later. You in?" Normally I would have thrown on a hoodie and gone without hesitation. But now even the thought of putting that hoodie back on made me feel like I was suffocating. My heart thudded against my ribs. Did I dare step outside as her, even in some small way? I stared at my reflection, at the soft lavender blouse my mom had given me last week, paired with skinny jeans and a pair of ballet flats she had let me borrow. It wasn't over the top, not even shocking. But it was different, undeniably different from what my friends were used to seeing. I paced my room, debating with myself until my mom appeared at the door. She took one look at me, at my clenched fists and nervous eyes, and simply said, "The only way to know is to try." Her words rang in my ears as I made my way to the cafe. Every step on the wet pavement felt heavier than the last, my umbrella shielding me from the drizzle but not from the storm inside me. My palms were slick with sweat, and by the time I reached the entrance, I almost turned back. But then I saw them through the glass. Daniel waving, smiling, completely unaware of the battle raging inside me. When I pushed open the door, time seemed to slow. Heads turned briefly before going back to their conversations, but to me it felt like every pair of eyes lingered. My stomach churned, but I forced myself to walk toward my friends. Daniel blinked when he saw me, his smile faltering for just a second before returning. "Hey, you look different," he said with a curious tilt of his head. The others glanced, whispered, then shrugged it off, quickly pulling me into their chatter. It wasn't perfect. There were stares, there were moments of awkward silence, but it wasn't the disaster I had feared. For an entire hour I sat among them, sipping my coffee, my blouse soft against my skin, my hair brushed neatly. I wasn't invisible, but I wasn't destroyed either. That realization lit something inside me, a spark of courage that I carried home through the rain. When I told my mom what happened, she hugged me tightly, pride radiating from her. "See, the world is not always kind, but it's not always cruel either. Sometimes it's just waiting for you to show up." Still, the path forward wasn't smooth. School became the real battlefield. I had always been quiet, keeping to myself. But now my appearance began to shift subtly day by day. A hint of eyeliner, a softer sweater, jeans that hugged differently. Whispers followed me down hallways, snickers that cut deep even when I tried to ignore them. There were days I went home and collapsed on my bed, tears soaking into my pillow, convinced I couldn't handle it. But every time I faltered, my mom was there. She would sit with me, brushing my hair back, reminding me of how far I had come. "Courage isn't about never falling," she would say. "It's about standing back up even when it hurts." The hardest moment came one afternoon when I walked into class wearing a simple floral scarf my mom had given me. It was small, barely noticeable to most, but to the wrong people, it was enough. A group of boys at the back started whispering loudly, mocking, throwing cruel words that stung more than I wanted to admit. My cheeks burned, my throat tightened, and I wanted to disappear. For a split second, I thought about ripping the scarf off, hiding it, retreating back into the shell I had worked so hard to escape. But then, out of nowhere, a girl from my class named Aisha leaned over and said, "That scarf looks beautiful on you. Where did you get it?" Her voice was genuine, steady, a lifeline tossed into the storm. The boys sneered, but their laughter faded when they saw I wasn't breaking. My hands still shook under the desk, but inside something solidified. I wasn't completely alone. That night, as I sat in front of the mirror, my scarf draped neatly around my neck, I whispered to my reflection, "You survived today." And in that whisper, I felt a new strength take root. Transformation wasn't just about clothes or makeup. It was about resilience, about learning that identity carries battles but also victories. And each small victory, no matter how fragile, was worth celebrating. As the months rolled on, I grew bolder. My mom began teaching me not just how to wear her clothes, but how to make them mine. She showed me how to pair colors, how to walk with confidence, how to look someone in the eye without flinching. Slowly, I began to stitch together a version of myself that wasn't hiding anymore. But the biggest test still loomed ahead. The moment when family beyond my mom would see me, really see me, and I would have no choice but to face whatever judgment came. The thought of my extended family finding out about me lingered in the back of my mind like a shadow I couldn't shake. It was one thing to face classmates, strangers at a cafe, or whispers in the hallway. It was another to stand before people who had known me since I was a child, who had fixed their expectations of who I was supposed to be long before I even understood myself. My mom never pushed me, but she knew it was coming. She knew hiding forever wasn't an option. It happened sooner than I thought. My grandmother's birthday was approaching, and as always, the entire family was gathering at her house for dinner. My mom came into my room the night before, holding a dress. Not a flashy one, not delicate lace this time, but a soft navy blue dress with sleeves that draped gently at the shoulders. "This is yours if you want it," she said quietly. I stared at it, my chest tightening with 1,000 emotions. Fear, longing, terror. I barely slept that night, my mind spinning with possible outcomes. Would they laugh? Would they whisper? Would they shun me? Would my grandmother look at me with disappointment in her eyes? By morning, I almost convinced myself not to wear it. But when I held the dress against me in the mirror, I couldn't deny the calm that washed over me. Felt right. Too right to ignore. As we drove to my grandmother's house, my heart pounded so loudly I thought my mom could hear it. She reached over, squeezed my hand and whispered, "Whatever happens, you have me." Those words were the only thing keeping me from breaking apart. Walking into the house was like stepping onto a stage. Conversations paused, eyes turned, forks hovered mid-air. I froze in the doorway, every instinct screaming at me to run. My uncle's eyebrows shot up, my aunt's lips tightened, my cousins whispered behind their hands. The silence was suffocating. And then my grandmother, fragile, soft-spoken but sharper than anyone gave her credit for, stood up from her chair and walked toward me. I braced myself for the sting of rejection. But instead she reached out, touched the sleeve of my dress and smiled. "This color suits you," she said gently, her voice calm but firm. "You look happy." Tears welled in my eyes instantly. The tension in the room cracked like glass under pressure. My aunt looked away uncomfortably. My uncle cleared his throat, but no one dared to say anything after my grandmother's blessing. In her quiet way, she had silenced the storm before it began. Dinner was awkward but survivable. There were still glances, still whispers when they thought I wasn't listening, but there was also my grandmother's smile across the table, steady and reassuring. And my mom's hand on mine under the table, reminding me that I wasn't facing this alone. Later that night, when most of the guests had left, my grandmother called me into her room. I sat on the edge of her bed, my hands trembling, waiting for the words I feared were coming. She looked at me for a long moment, her eyes kind but searching. "You remind me of myself when I was young," she said finally. "Everyone thought they knew who I should be, how I should act, but I had to find my own way. People will talk, they always do, but happiness is too rare to throw away for their comfort." I broke down then, tears spilling uncontrollably, and she held my hand, her grip surprisingly strong for someone so delicate. "Be patient," she whispered. "The world may not understand right away, but one day they will." That moment changed something in me. I realized acceptance doesn't always come in waves. Sometimes it comes in drops, one kind word at a time, just enough to keep you standing. When we got home, I collapsed into bed, exhausted but strangely lighter. The fear hadn't disappeared, but it no longer owned me. I had faced the people I dreaded most, and though it wasn't perfect, I had survived. More than that, I had been seen, even if only by my grandmother, and that was enough to keep me moving forward. From then on, I stopped thinking of my transformation as something temporary, something I could undo if the world became too cruel. It wasn't a phase. It wasn't a game. It was me. Every choice I made, every piece of clothing I wore, every word of encouragement from my mom and grandmother, it was all part of building the person I was always meant to be. But I also knew the hardest battles were still ahead. School was becoming a minefield, family acceptance was fragile, and I hadn't yet learned how to face myself fully in the mirror without doubt gnawing at me. There were moments of triumph, yes, but also nights of despair, when the weight of everything threatened to crush me. The transformation wasn't a straight line. It was a storm, waves of courage followed by tides of fear, moments of clarity followed by shadows of doubt. But even storms carve paths, and I knew now I had no choice but to keep walking mine. Because once you've seen yourself clearly, once you've felt that glimpse of truth, you can never go back to the darkness of pretending. The days after my grandmother's quiet blessing felt strangely different, as if the world had tilted slightly. For the first time, I didn't wake up with the same heavy dread pressing down on me. There was still fear, yes. Fear never left completely, but it wasn't choking me anymore. It was more like a shadow following me instead of a chain dragging me down. That small shift mattered more than I ever expected. But school remained the place where my transformation felt most fragile. At home I could dress freely. At family gatherings, I could lean on my grandmother's calm strength. At school, however, every hallway felt like a stage, every locker slam like a drumbeat announcing my presence. The lavender blouse, the floral scarf, the softer jeans. Each one had made me feel closer to myself, but also exposed me to whispers and stares. I knew I couldn't keep walking the thin line forever. I had to either retreat back into the shell of who I used to be or step forward fully, no matter the cost. It was a Tuesday morning when the choice was forced on me. I stood in front of my closet, staring at my old hoodie hanging next to the navy blue dress my mom had given me. My chest tightened. The hoodie felt safe but suffocating. The dress felt terrifying but true. My mom poked her head into my room, sensing my hesitation. She didn't say much, just placed her hand on my shoulder and whispered, "You know which one feels like you." I swallowed hard and reached for the dress. Walking into school that morning was like walking into fire. Conversations died as I passed. Some kids stared openly, others laughed under their breath, a few sneered. My palms were sweating so badly I could barely hold my books, and my heart raced so fast I thought it might burst. Every instinct screamed at me to run, to hide, to rip the dress off and pretend it never happened. But then something unexpected happened. As I walked down the hallway, a girl I barely knew, her name was Sana, I think, smiled at me. Not a mocking smile, not a pitying one, but warm and genuine. She leaned closer as I passed and said, "You look really pretty today." Just like that. Simple. Fruitless. But it hit me harder than any insult ever could. That tiny kindness gave me strength to keep walking, even when the stairs burned. I made it through my classes in a haze, every second feeling like an hour. There were still whispers, still boys at the back of the room snickering, but the memory of that smile and those words carried me through the day. By lunchtime, I couldn't bring myself to sit at my usual table. My best friend Daniel spotted me hesitating and waved me over. His eyes scanned me up and down, and for a second I braced for the worst. But then he shrugged and grinned. "So, new look, huh? Gonna take some getting used to. But hey, as long as you're still you, I don't care." Relief flooded through me so fast it almost made me dizzy. Daniel wasn't poetic, he wasn't dramatic, but his casual acceptance meant more than anything. It told me I didn't have to lose everyone to become myself. Course, not everyone reacted the same way. By the end of the day, rumors were already spreading, jokes being made. Some kids avoided me altogether, their silence louder than words. Others whispered cruel things just loud enough for me to hear. It hurt more than I wanted to admit. But when I got home, collapsed onto the couch, and saw my mom waiting with open arms, I realized something important. Yes, the world could be cruel, but it could also surprise me with kindness in places I least expected. That night, I stood in front of the mirror again, the navy blue dress still clinging softly to my frame. I stared at my reflection, at the girl looking back at me, and whispered, "You survived today." Just like I had done after the scarf incident. Only this time it wasn't just survival, it felt like a victory. The next few weeks became a whirlwind of highs and lows. Some days I walked through school with my head high, encouraged by the few who smiled or complimented me. Other days I fought back tears in the bathroom, wishing the floor would swallow me whole. My notebooks filled with entries of both triumph and despair, my handwriting shaky and emotional, but always honest. Slowly, though, something shifted. People got used to seeing me. The stares weren't as sharp, the whispers not as loud. It didn't mean acceptance, not fully, but it meant I wasn't new anymore. I wasn't a shock. I was just there, present, existing. One afternoon, the principal asked to see me. My stomach knotted, fearing the worst. But when I sat in his office, he surprised me. His tone was awkward, careful, but not unkind. "You have the right to be yourself here," he said. "If anyone gives you trouble, you come to me." It wasn't a warm embrace, but it was protection. And in its own way, it was powerful. That night when I told my mom, she smiled through tears. "Do you see?" she whispered. "The world is shifting piece by piece. You're part of that shift." The first time I walked outside in broad daylight, fully dressed, with makeup carefully done and hair brushed to shine, I felt the wind catch the hem of my skirt. People glanced, some smiled, some frowned, but I didn't shrink. I stood tall, my heart racing but steady. For the first time I wasn't just hiding her inside me, I was living as her. And in that moment, standing in the open air with the world watching, I knew this wasn't just a journey anymore. It was my life, my truth. And no matter how many storms came, I was ready to face them. When I woke up the next morning, sunlight poured softly into my room, filtering through the curtains in golden streams that made everything feel surreal, as if the events of the past few days had been nothing more than a dream. For a moment, I even convinced myself that none of it had happened, that Mom hadn't opened up to me, that I hadn't slipped into her silky lingerie, that I hadn't looked into the mirror and seen someone both strange and familiar staring back at me. But then I shifted in bed, felt the faint trace of moisturizer on my skin, and remembered the way Mom had stood behind me. Her voice calm yet filled with emotion, telling me that maybe this side of me was something I wasn't supposed to keep buried forever. The thought of it made my heart race. I sat up slowly, looking around my room, and everything felt different, though nothing had changed. My posters were still on the wall, my books still stacked messily on the shelf, my old sneakers still sitting by the door. But me, I wasn't the same. I felt like I was carrying a secret that was at once heavy and light, terrifying yet liberating. I pulled my blanket tighter around myself, realizing that for the first time in my life, I had crossed a line I could never uncross. I had stepped into a world I didn't fully understand, but a part of me didn't want to step back out. As the day stretched forward, I couldn't shake the images from last night out of my mind. The way the satin had clung to my skin, how natural it had felt, how Mom hadn't judged me but instead guided me, even encouraged me. I kept asking myself, was it wrong? Was I doing something I shouldn't? Or was this just another side of who I really was? The questions pressed in on me until I finally got up, went downstairs, and found Mom in the kitchen, humming softly to herself as she poured coffee. She looked up at me, her eyes warm but searching, as if she knew I was carrying something heavy inside. "Morning," she said simply, her tone casual but with a hint of knowing. I muttered a quiet morning back and sat down at the table, fiddling with my fingers. For a long while, I couldn't find the courage to speak. But then Mom broke the silence. "I know you've been thinking about it," she said softly, sipping her coffee. "Last night, and everything that came with it." My throat went dry. She was right, of course. "Yeah," I admitted, barely above a whisper. "I can't stop thinking about it." Mom set her cup down, folded her hands, and looked at me in a way that was neither critical nor dismissive. It was the look of someone who wanted me to be honest, not just with her but with myself. "You don't have to have all the answers right now," she said. "But if it's something you want to explore, I don't want you to feel ashamed. You're not alone in this." Her words washed over me, calming and terrifying all at once. "But what if it changes everything?" I asked, my voice trembling. "What if people find out? What if I'm not who I thought I was?" Mom leaned closer, her voice steady. "Who you are isn't defined by what you wear. But sometimes the clothes we choose help us see ourselves more clearly. That's not something to be afraid of. It's something to learn from." I stared down at the table, my heart racing again. There was a part of me that wanted to hide, to push it all away and pretend last night had never happened. But another part, bigger, louder, was desperate to feel it again. To slip into something soft, to see myself in a way that felt strangely true. And before I could stop myself, I whispered, "Can I try again?" The words hung in the air, fragile and vulnerable, but Mom didn't flinch. She nodded slowly, her expression kind. "Of course," she said. "But this time, let's do it properly. Not just a single piece of lingerie. Let's see who you really are when you let go of fear." The thought made me shiver. "Properly," I repeated, nervous and excited. Mom smiled gently. "If you're ready." For the rest of the day, I couldn't think about anything else. My mind kept circling back to what Mom had said. About doing it properly, about letting go of fear. When evening finally came, I found myself standing in her doorway again, my nerves frayed but my determination stronger than it had ever been. Mom was already waiting for me, a few boxes laid out on her bed, the kind she only brought out for special occasions. She looked at me and asked softly, "Are you sure?" I hesitated only a moment before nodding. "Yes," I said, my voice trembling but certain. She opened the first box, and my breath caught in my throat. Inside was a delicate set. Lace, satin, soft shades of cream and pale pink, the kind of thing I'd only ever seen in magazines or on mannequins in store windows. It looked impossibly fragile, yet full of power. "This was one of my favorites," Mom said with a faint smile. "I kept it because it made me feel like I could be anyone. Maybe it can do the same for you." I swallowed hard, my hands shaking as I reached out to touch the fabric. The moment my fingers brushed against it, I felt a rush of emotions. Fear, excitement, longing, confusion, all tangled together in a knot inside my chest. Slowly, carefully, I took the pieces and disappeared into her bathroom, shutting the door behind me. Standing there alone, staring at myself in the mirror, I realized this was the moment. Not last night, not the first time I slipped into something forbidden. This was the moment where I would either retreat back into the safety of denial, or step fully into the unknown. I closed my eyes, took a deep breath, and began to change. When I look back at everything that happened, it feels almost unreal, like the story belonged to someone else, yet I can still feel every heartbeat, every moment of hesitation, every whisper of silk against my skin as though it just happened yesterday. By the time things reached the final stage of this strange but beautiful journey, I wasn't the same person anymore. What started with nervous laughter in my mom's bedroom had become something so much deeper, a thread of identity I hadn't been able to grasp until then. It was late one evening when the final piece of the puzzle clicked into place. Mom came into my room holding a small box in her hands, and her expression was so calm that I knew something meaningful was about to happen. She sat down beside me on the edge of the bed and gently placed the box in my lap. "I think it's time," she said softly, her voice filled with something between love and certainty, as if she had known where all of this was going long before I ever did. My hands shook as I opened the lid. Inside lay something I never expected to see. A delicate black dress, simple yet elegant, paired with a set of matching heels and a subtle necklace. It wasn't just clothing. It was a vision, a statement, almost like an invitation to step into a version of myself I had been circling around but never fully embraced. I looked up at her, my throat dry, unsure whether I should laugh, cry, or hide. "Mom, this is..." My voice trailed off, but she reached out and placed her hand over mine. "It's you," she whispered. "It's the you I've seen trying to bloom every time you slipped into my things, every time your eyes lit up when you saw yourself in the mirror. You don't need to apologize for wanting this. You just need to decide if you're ready to see yourself for who you really are." Those words hit me harder than anything before. The suspense I had been living in for weeks, the constant question of whether I was just playing dress-up or whether there was something more, suddenly crystallized. I wasn't pretending. I wasn't confused. I was uncovering. Slowly, with trembling hands, I lifted the dress from the box. The fabric was soft, smooth, and almost frightening in its beauty, as if it might expose every hidden part of me. I slipped into it carefully, every movement slow and deliberate. When the zipper closed and I turned toward the mirror, I barely recognized the reflection staring back. My hair was brushed and parted to the side, my face still gentle with the faint touches of makeup Mom had helped me practice earlier in the week. But it wasn't the makeup or the dress that caught me off guard. It was the expression. For the first time, I wasn't looking at someone who was experimenting or playing. I was looking at someone alive, authentic, and certain. Mom stood behind me in the reflection, smiling so faintly, almost proud but more importantly supportive. "Do you see it now?" she asked. I nodded, unable to stop the tears that welled in my eyes. My entire chest felt like it was breaking open, not from pain but from release. The suspense of hiding, of being unsure, was gone. In its place was a strange calm, as though I had just walked through a storm and finally stepped into the quiet after. That night we sat together for hours. I walked around the house in the dress and heels, learning the rhythm of movement, laughing when I stumbled, blushing when I caught sight of myself in the mirror again and again. Mom never stopped encouraging me, her voice steady, reminding me that it was okay to take my time, that I didn't need to have all the answers at once. The emotional twists were not over though, because even in that safety, a part of me was afraid. Afraid of what others would say. Afraid of how friends, family, or the world outside those walls might react if they saw me like this. But every time the fear surfaced, I remembered her words. "You just need to decide if you're ready to see yourself for who you really are." And I was. Finally was. That evening became a turning point. It wasn't just about lingerie, dresses, or transformation anymore. It was about identity, truth, and finding the courage to claim something I had buried inside me for so long. By the time I slipped back out of the dress and carefully folded it away, I wasn't afraid of losing it. Because I knew, no matter how long it took or how much strength it required, I had finally seen myself clearly. And once you see yourself, you can never go back to being invisible. I didn't think life could shift again after everything I had already gone through, but it did, and in ways I never expected. Living openly in my mom's house as someone who wore her lingerie, her clothes, her dresses, wasn't just about fabric and lace anymore. It had become about a truth I was only just learning to admit to myself. The secrecy, the fear, the shame, they were slipping away piece by piece, replaced by something fragile but powerful: acceptance. And acceptance, I was realizing, was both terrifying and liberating. Mom started treating me differently too. Not in a way that made me feel distant, but in a way that made me feel seen. She would leave small things for me on my bed. Lip gloss, a pair of stockings, sometimes even a delicate slip she said didn't fit her anymore. She never said the words, but each little gift felt like a silent nod that she was with me, that I wasn't hiding in shadows anymore. Every time I found something new waiting for me, my heart would beat faster. I'd pick it up carefully, as if it were made of glass, and I'd whisper to myself that I didn't have to keep pretending to be someone I wasn't. But that's the strange thing about transformation. It doesn't happen in one night, or with one conversation. Comes in waves. Some days I felt invincible, walking past mirrors and admiring how a bit of makeup and fabric could make me glow in ways I never thought possible. Other days, the old doubts came flooding back. I'd stare at myself too long and wonder if this was real, or if I was just fooling myself. Was I strong enough to carry this version of me into the world, or was I destined to keep it locked in this house forever? The first real test came one weekend when Mom suggested we go shopping together. Not just groceries, she said with a little smile. Something for you. The words lingered in the air, heavy with meaning. My throat tightened. The thought of stepping into a store, of picking something openly, terrified me. But Mom's steady eyes gave me courage. That Saturday we drove to a mall farther away from our neighborhood, somewhere nobody knew us. My hands shook as we walked into a boutique filled with soft lighting, perfume, and rows of silk and satin. I thought I'd faint just from the sound of hangers sliding on the racks. Mom guided me with a calmness I didn't feel. She picked up a pale pink nightgown and held it up against me. "This color will make your skin look like it's glowing," she whispered. The saleswoman came over, smiling politely, and for a second I thought I'd crumble under her gaze. But she didn't laugh, didn't judge, she just asked, "Would you like to try it on?" That moment, standing in a fitting room, pulling the nightgown over my body, seeing myself reflected in a full-length mirror under bright store lights, it felt like stepping into a different reality. No hiding, no shadows, just me as I was. I ran my hands down the satin fabric, and for the first time, I didn't feel like I was pretending. When I stepped out, Mom's eyes lit up. "You look beautiful," she said without hesitation, without doubt. And in that instant I believed her. For once, the reflection wasn't a stranger. It was me, exactly as I was meant to be. On the drive home I couldn't stop smiling. My nerves hadn't disappeared, but something deeper had replaced them. Oh. I realized then that maybe the world wasn't as cruel as I feared. Maybe there was a place for me beyond the walls of this house. But with hope came risk. What if others didn't understand? What if they saw me and decided I was something to mock, to tear down? The questions haunted me late at night, but each time I opened my drawer and felt the satin, lace, and silk against my fingers, I knew I could never go back to the person I was before. The story wasn't over. It was only beginning. And though I didn't know where it would lead me, I knew one thing for certain. I wasn't walking this path alone. When I think back to everything that happened, it feels like I was walking through a maze where every turn revealed another part of myself I hadn't dared to face before. That night, after standing in the mirror and finally admitting to myself that what I felt was real, I couldn't sleep. My body buzzed with too much energy, my thoughts racing in circles, and every time I closed my eyes, I saw flashes of myself in the lingerie, in the wig, in the reflection that felt both alien and familiar. I lay awake staring at the ceiling, my heart caught between terror and exhilaration, knowing I couldn't go back to pretending this was just a passing phase. Something inside me had shifted for good. The next morning at breakfast, Mom looked at me like she could see straight into my head. She didn't say anything at first, just poured me coffee and asked if I had slept. I lied and said I had, but she tilted her head knowingly. Finally she spoke softly. "You've been carrying this inside for a long time, haven't you?" My throat tightened, and all I could do was nod. She reached across the table, her hand warm on mine, and whispered, "You don't have to carry it alone anymore." Those words broke me. I cried harder than I had in years, right there at the table, and she didn't let go of my hand once. That was the moment I realized she wasn't just helping me play dress-up. She was helping me unlock a part of myself I'd been too afraid to claim. Over the next few days, I felt a shift in how I moved through the house. I no longer avoided the mirror. I didn't flinch when I caught my reflection. Instead, I studied it, experimenting with little changes, styling my hair differently, adjusting my posture, even practicing how to walk with more grace. It was subtle, almost like rehearsing a secret performance, except this time the audience was just me, and the applause came from within when I felt that spark of recognition. But with that growing confidence came fear too. I started to wonder, what if someone else found out? What if the outside world wasn't as kind as my mother's gaze? The thought haunted me, creeping in during the quietest moments. At the same time, though, a part of me longed to be seen, to test whether the identity I was crafting inside the safety of our home could survive beyond its walls. One afternoon, Mom seemed to read my mind again. She came into my room carrying a dress I had never seen before, simple but elegant, with soft fabric that caught the light in a way that made it shimmer. She handed it to me and said, "I think it's time you try this. You don't have to go anywhere in it. Just try it on, see how it feels." My hands trembled as I took it from her. Slipping into that dress was unlike anything else. It wasn't just about the clothes anymore. It was about the way they made me feel, lighter, more connected to myself, as though each layer pulled me closer to who I really was. When I stepped out and saw her reaction, the pride in her smile, it felt like she was giving me permission not only to explore but to exist. Still doubts clung to me. I asked her that night if she thought people outside would ever understand. She sighed, brushed my hair back and said, "Some will, some won't. But the only person who truly has to understand is you. If you know who you are, the rest becomes noise." Those words stayed with me. They scared me, but they also lit a fire inside me. I realized that this wasn't just about lingerie or dresses or makeup. It was about identity. It was about peeling back the layers I had hidden under for years and finally letting myself breathe. I didn't have all the answers yet. I didn't know what the future held or how others would react. But for the first time in my life, I felt like I was standing on the edge of something real. And though the unknown terrified me, it also called to me, daring me to take the next step.